Mira sat in silence for a long moment. The recording device hummed softly on the table between them. Outside, birds sang in the peaceful afternoon of Kelvin Prime. But inside this room, she felt like she was standing on a battlefield 40 years in the past. "What happened after that night?" she finally asked. Vorik rubbed his face with his wrinkled hands. "We regrouped. Our commander, General Tovik, was furious. He could not accept that 23 primitives were destroying his army. He ordered us to burn the forest, kill everything, leave nothing alive." "Did it work?" The old soldier laughed bitterly. "The humans had already moved. They knew we would do this. They had been studying us, learning our patterns, predicting our actions. While we burned empty forest, they attacked our supply lines. They destroyed our food stores. They poisoned our water tanks." Vorik leaned back in his chair. But the worst part was not the attacks. The silence between attacks. They would go quiet for days. We would start to relax. We would think maybe they were finally dead. Then the music would start. "Music?" Mira asked, confused. "Human music. Strange sounds that made no sense to our ears. They would broadcast it through our communication channels at night. Sometimes it was soft and slow. Sometimes it was loud and angry. We could not sleep. We could not think. Our soldiers started seeing things that were not there. Some of them went mad." Vorik stood up and walked to a cabinet. He pulled out an old bottle of dark liquid and poured himself a drink. "This is a human drink. Whiskey, they call it. I learned to enjoy it after the war. Strange, yes? The creatures that gave me nightmares also gave me my favorite drink." He took a sip and continued. "One night we found one of our patrols. All 12 soldiers dead. But the humans had not killed them with weapons. They had simply scared them. We found the bodies with their weapons still fully charged. They died from heart failure. Their hearts stopped from pure terror." Mira felt sick. How is that possible? "We did not know then. We learned later about human psychological warfare. They are masters of fear. They use it like a weapon. They understand that breaking the mind is more effective than breaking the body." The old Kelvani returned to his seat. "After 3 weeks, our 500 soldiers were down to 260. Park Tae-ho still had most of his 23. Our commanders finally realized we were not fighting animals. We were fighting something far more dangerous." "They sent for reinforcements?" "Not yet. General Tovik was too proud. He believed he could still win with what he had. He planned a massive attack on the human base. We would use all our remaining soldiers in one final push." Vorik's eyes grew distant. "That was when I first saw her." "The human medic." "A medic?" "Yes, a healer. But do not be fooled by that word. She was as terrifying as any soldier." Vorik shook his head slowly. "We attacked at dawn. We knew where their base was hidden in the mountains. We surrounded it. 300 soldiers against their small camp. It should have been a massacre." "But it wasn't," Mira said quietly. "No, it was a massacre, just not the one we expected." Vorik took another drink. "The humans fought like nothing I had ever seen. They did not retreat. They did not surrender. When their weapons ran out, they used rocks. When the rocks were gone, they used their hands. I saw a human woman tackle a Kelvani warrior twice her size and kill him with a knife she had hidden in her boot." "And the medic?" Vorik closed his eyes. Kim Yuna was treating wounded soldiers near the back of their camp. When we broke through the defenses, she was surrounded by injured humans who could not walk. Any normal person would have surrendered. Any normal person would have tried to run. He opened his eyes. She picked up a rifle. She stood in front of her patients. And she killed 11 of our soldiers before we could stop her. 11. A medic. A healer. When she finally went down, it was because a plasma blast hit her in the side. And still, She tried to crawl back to her patients. Vorik's voice was filled with something between horror and respect. We thought she was dead. We moved past her to secure the wounded. Then somehow she stood up, blood pouring from her wound, her leg barely working. She stood up, grabbed the soldier's pistol, and kept fighting. Impossible, Mira whispered. I watched it happen. I was there. Vorik leaned forward. This is what you must understand about humans. They do not know when to die. They do not accept defeat. Their bodies can be broken, and they will keep moving. Their hearts can be stopped, and they will restart them through pure will. They are not like us. They are not like any species in the galaxy. He picked up the dog tag again, running his thumb over the worn letters. Park Tae-ho found us that day. He came out of the smoke like a demon from old stories. His arm was in a rough bandage. He had burns on his face and chest. He should have been in a hospital. Instead, he was leading a counterattack. I shot him 3 times, 3 direct hits with my plasma rifle. He stumbled, he fell, and then he got back up. Vorik's hands were shaking badly now. He looked at me with those hollow eyes, those empty, calculating eyes, and he smiled again. That terrible smile. Then he raised his weapon and fired. The old soldier touched a scar on his chest. I should have died that day. The blast hit me here, near my heart. I fell into darkness, certain I would never wake up. But I did wake up. In a human medical tent. Kim Yuna, the same medic I had seen fight like a warrior, was treating my wounds. Mira stared at him in disbelief. They saved you? After everything? Vorik nodded slowly. That was when I truly began to fear them. Enemies I could understand. Killers I could understand. But these humans, they would fight like demons, and then show mercy like saints. They would tear through our armies, and then heal our wounded. He looked at Mira with old, tired eyes. How do you fight something like that? How do you defeat an enemy that you cannot predict? That is what made the human war front a nightmare. Not just their strength, not just their endurance, but the fact that we never knew which version of them we would face. The demon or the angel, the warrior or the healer. He finished his drink. Mira adjusted her recording device. The afternoon sun had moved across the sky, and shadows now filled the corners of Vorik's small home. She had come expecting a simple interview. She was getting something much more. I need to ask you something, she said carefully. Our technology was better. Our weapons were stronger. Our soldiers were larger and lived longer. Why could we not defeat them? Vorik was quiet for a long moment. He stared at the wall where an old military medal hung, covered in dust. After I recovered from my wounds, I was transferred to our research division. The generals wanted to understand humans. They wanted to find their weakness. Did you find one? No. Vorik shook his head. What we found was far worse. We found out why they were so difficult to kill. He stood up and walked to a shelf filled with old books and documents. He pulled out a worn folder and handed it to Mira. Inside were diagrams of human biology, written in both Kelvani and human languages. Look at this, he said, pointing to a drawing of a human brain. Humans have a chemical in their bodies called adrenaline. When they are in danger, this chemical floods their system. It makes them faster, stronger. It blocks their pain. For a short time, they become something more than they normally are. Mira studied the documents. We have similar chemicals. Not like this. Our battle hormones make us more focused. Human adrenaline makes them almost unstoppable. They can lift objects twice their weight. They can run with broken legs. They can fight with wounds that would kill any Kelvani. Vorik sat back down heavily. But that is not the worst part. What is the worst part? They evolved as something called persistence predators. Vorik's voice was grim. On their homeworld, they did not have natural weapons. No claws, no fangs, no armor. They were weak compared to the animals around them. so they developed a different strategy. They would chase their prey. Not fast, but steady. They would follow an animal for hours, for days, until the creature collapsed from exhaustion. Then they would kill it. Mira felt a chill. They just kept walking, running, following, never stopping. Vorik nodded. Their bodies are built for this. They can regulate their heat better than any species we have studied. They can go without sleep for days when necessary. They heal from injuries that would permanently disable us. They are biological machines designed for one purpose, to never, ever give up. The old soldier picked up a small photograph from the table beside him. It showed a young human male with a gentle smile. This is Han Sung-woo, a private. He was 22 years old. Who was he? A soldier in Park Tae-ho's unit. Nothing special about him at first look. Quiet, friendly. The other humans said he wrote poetry. Vorik's voice grew soft. He became a legend on Velos 9. Mira leaned forward. What did he do? After months of fighting, we had pushed the humans back to a small area in the northern mountains. Our generals built a command center there to coordinate the final attack. It was heavily defended. Force fields, guard towers, 300 elite soldiers. Nobody could get in. Vorik set down the photograph. Han Sung-woo got in. How? We captured him during a small battle. His leg was badly wounded. He could barely walk. We thought he was just a young, scared soldier who had been left behind by his unit. He seemed harmless. Our interrogators decided to question him later and put him in a holding cell near the command center. The old Kelvani closed his eyes. That was his plan. The whole thing. The battle, getting captured, the wound that made him seem helpless. All of it was planned. He had explosives hidden inside his own body, surgically implanted. Not even our scanners could detect them. Mira's eyes went wide. Inside his body? Yes. His own people had cut him open and put bombs inside him. Then they sewed him back up and sent him to get captured. Vorik's voice trembled. Do you understand what that means? His mission was always to die. He volunteered to become a living bomb. He let us capture him so he could get close to our commanders. What happened? That night, he broke out of his cell. Somehow. We still do not know how. He walked through the command center. Guards saw him, but he was already inside the perimeter. They were confused. By the time they realized the danger, it was too late. Vorik opened his eyes. The survivors said he was singing. A soft song, something from his childhood. A lullaby his mother used to sing. He walked into the main command room, surrounded by our highest officers, and he smiled. Then he detonated. The room was silent, except for the soft hum of the recording device. 40 officers died, Vorik continued quietly. 40 of our best military minds, killed by one wounded boy who walked into death singing his mother's song. That attack crippled our operations on Velos 9 for months. Mira struggled to find words. Why would anyone do that? How could someone accept such a mission? Vorik laughed, but there was no humor in it. That is the question that haunted our scientists. That is the question that made our generals lose sleep. We studied human psychology. We analyzed their culture. We tried to understand what made them willing to die so easily. He leaned forward, his old eyes intense. Do you know what we discovered? It was not hate. It was not anger. It was not even duty. It was love. Love? Love for their families. Love for their friends. Love for their species. Love for an idea they called home. Vorik's voice cracked. Han Sung-woo had a younger sister back on Earth. He left her a message before his mission. Our intelligence officers found it. Do you know what it said? Mira shook her head. It said, so you can grow up free. That was all. So you can grow up free. Vorik wiped his eyes with a shaking hand. He walked into death, singing his mother's lullaby, so his little sister could live in a galaxy where she was not a slave. The old soldier stood up and walked to the window. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. "That is what makes humans the most dangerous species in the universe," he said softly. "Not their adrenaline, not their endurance, not their cleverness. It is their love. They love so deeply, so completely, that they will burn everything, including themselves, for those they care about." He turned to face Mira, his expression haunted. "How do you defeat an enemy who considers death a small price to pay? How do you break the will of someone who has already decided their life is worth less than their loved one's freedom?" He shook his head slowly. "You cannot. That is the answer our scientists never found. You cannot break such a will. You can only pray they decide to show mercy." Night had fully fallen on Kelvin Prime. Mira had been in Vorik's home for hours, but she could not leave. Not yet. Not when the story was reaching its climax. After Han Sung-woo's attack, everything changed, Vorik said. He had poured himself another drink, but had not touched it. The High Command was furious. They sent 10,000 fresh soldiers to Velos 9, the largest force ever assembled against a single human colony. 10,000 against how many humans? By then, Park Tae-ho had 47 soldiers left. 47 humans against 10,000 Kelvani warriors. Vorik shook his head. Our generals called it the final cleansing. They said it would be over in days. Mira already knew it had not ended that way. But she waited for Vorik to continue. I was assigned to the assault on their last position, a hospital built into a mountain. The humans had turned it into a fortress. Vorik picked up his untouched drink and finally took a sip. There was something strange about that hospital. Kim Yuna had set it up to treat wounded soldiers, but not just human soldiers, Kelvani soldiers too. She was treating your wounded? Yes, our soldiers who had been captured or left behind. She did not let them die. She treated them the same as her own people, fed them, gave them medicine, even talked to them. Vorik's expression was troubled. When our commanders found out, they could not understand it. It seemed like madness. Why heal your enemies in the middle of a war? Why did she do it? I asked her that question later. She told me that wounded soldiers are not enemies. They are just people in pain. She said healing was her purpose, her duty. She could not turn it off just because someone wore a different uniform. Vorik sighed deeply. That woman confused me more than any warrior I ever faced. He set down his drink. The assault began at dawn. 10,000 of us against their mountain hospital. We had artillery. We had air support. We had the finest weapons the Dominion could provide. The humans had rocks and old rifles and 47 tired soldiers. The battle started badly for them. Our artillery destroyed their outer defenses in minutes. Our troops poured through the gaps. For a moment, it seemed like our generals were right. It would be over quickly. Vorik stood up and began pacing. Then we reached the hospital itself, and everything fell apart. The humans had prepared for months. Every hallway was a trap. Every room was a kill zone. They had built walls from hospital beds. They had turned medical equipment into weapons, and they fought like nothing I had ever seen before. I watched a human nurse pick up a surgical knife and kill 3 soldiers before anyone could stop her. I watched old patients, people who could barely stand, grab weapons and join the defense. Everyone fought. Men, women, the wounded, the medical staff. Everyone. Vorik stopped by the window. Park Tae-ho was at the center of it all. He was everywhere at once, directing soldiers, fighting hand to hand, holding positions that should have been impossible to hold. Early in the battle, a plasma cannon hit his left arm. It burned it completely off. Mira gasped softly. He did not stop. He tied his rifle to his remaining arm with bandages. He kept fighting for 6 more hours. 6 hours with a wound that would have killed most species instantly. Vorik turned to face her. At one point I was close enough to see his face. There was no pain in his expression, no fear, only determination, only will. We were winning slowly. We had more soldiers, more weapons, more everything. But every meter we advanced cost us dearly. By afternoon, we had lost over 2,000 soldiers, 2,000 against 47, and still they fought. Then the sky opened up. What do you mean? Captain Bakhana, the commander of human forces in that sector. She had been gathering survivors from other colonies, training civilians, building a resistance from nothing. Vorik smiled grimly. She arrived with a stolen Kelvani cruiser and 200 soldiers, civilians she had trained in just 3 weeks. 200 soldiers broke a siege of 10,000? They did not break it through numbers. They broke it through madness. Vorik laughed quietly. She flew the cruiser directly into our command ship. Not a missile, not a bomb. The actual ship. She crashed it into our flagship at full speed. She and her crew jumped out in escape pods moments before impact. The explosion took out our entire command structure. Suddenly, 10,000 soldiers had no orders, no coordination, no leadership, and Bakhana's 200 civilians hit us from behind while we were confused. I was captured during that chaos. A young human soldier knocked me down and put a gun to my head. I prepared to die. But then Kim Yuna appeared. She told the soldier to stop. She said I was a patient now, not an enemy. They took me to the hospital, the same hospital we had been trying to destroy. Kim Yuna treated my wounds herself. She worked for hours, even though she had not slept in days, even though her own wound from months before had never fully healed. I asked her why. Why save me? Why show mercy to someone who had tried to kill her? Vorik opened his eyes. She said, because that is the difference between us. You fight to conquer. We fight to protect. And protection means nothing if we lose ourselves in the process. I did not understand her then. I think I understand her now. What happened after the battle? The Kelvani forces retreated from Velos 9. The first defeat our Dominion had suffered in 400 years. 10,000 soldiers pushed back by a handful of humans and civilians. Vorik reached for the dog tag again, the one with Park Tae-ho's name. When they released me, I walked to the edge of their territory. I looked back at the mountain hospital, still standing despite everything we had thrown at it. Park Tae-ho was standing on a ridge above, watching us leave. He was missing an arm. He was covered in bandages. He should have been dead 10 times over. But he stood there, straight and tall, watching his enemies retreat. Vorik's voice dropped to a whisper. And then he saluted us. Not mocking, not laughing. A real salute. A soldier's salute from one warrior to another. In that moment, I felt something I never expected. Respect. Deep, genuine respect for this enemy he had fought with everything he had, and then showed honor in victory. He looked at Mira with tired eyes. That was the day I realized we could never win this war. Not because they were stronger. Not because they were smarter. But because they were something we had never encountered before. They were worthy. The recording device had been running for hours. Its small light blinked steadily in the darkness of Vorik's home. Mira sat forward in her chair, knowing the interview was reaching its end. There is one question that historians have debated for 40 years, she said carefully. The question that everyone wants answered. Vorik nodded slowly. Why did we surrender? Yes, the Kelvani Dominion had conquered 200 worlds. We had the largest military in the galaxy. Even after Velos 9, we still had millions of soldiers. We could have continued fighting. We could have sent everything we had against Earth itself. But we did not. No. After 7 years of war, The Dominion surrendered unconditionally. Complete surrender. No terms, no negotiations. We simply gave up. Mira leaned forward. Vorik was silent for a long moment. He stared at his hands, old and wrinkled and still shaking after all these years. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because we finally understood what we were fighting. He stood up and walked to a locked cabinet in the corner of the room. He pulled out a small key from around his neck and opened it. Inside were old documents marked with the highest security classifications of the former Dominion. After Velos 9, the High Council demanded answers. They wanted to know everything about humans, their technology, their biology, their psychology, their history. Vorik pulled out a thick folder. I was assigned to the analysis team. We spent 3 years studying them. What did you find? We found that we had been fools. Vorik returned to his chair, the folder in his hands. We thought we were fighting humans at their full strength. We thought Velos 9 represented the best they could do. We were wrong. Inside were diagrams and charts and reports, all in the old Kelvani military language. Human nuclear weapons. We knew they had them. Small bombs that could destroy cities. Vorik pointed to a diagram. But they were holding back. Their scientists had developed weapons 1,000 times more powerful. Weapons that could crack planets. They chose not to use them. Their biological sciences. They understood genetics, diseases, engineered plagues. They could have created sickness that targeted only Kelvani biology. They chose not to. Their computer systems. They had artificial intelligences that could hack into any network, disable any defense. They limited these systems deliberately. They put rules on them. Vorik looked up at Mira. Do you understand what this means? Everything they did on Velos 9, every terrible thing that gave us nightmares, they did while holding back. They had rules, something they called ethics, that prevented them from using their full power. Even Park Tae-ho, Vorik continued, the demon of Velos 9, the man who killed hundreds of our soldiers. During the final battle, his unit found a bunker filled with Kelvani children, refugees who had been hiding there. Do you know what he did? Mira shook her head. He protected them. He put his own soldiers at risk to make sure those children were safely returned to our lines. The man who haunted our nightmares refused to harm children, even enemy children. Vorik closed the folder. The High Council ran projections. Simple questions. What happens if humans stop following their ethics? What happens if they decide to use their full power? What happens if they stop being merciful? His voice grew cold. The projections were classified at the highest level. I was one of only 12 people allowed to see them. The results showed extinction. Complete extinction of the Kelvani species. Mira felt her blood run cold. Extinction? Their weapons, fully unleashed, could destroy every world we held. Their biological sciences could wipe us out as a species. Their psychological warfare could break our entire civilization. Vorik's hands trembled. And the worst part? The projections said they could do it in less than 50 years. Not centuries, decades. He set down the folder. That is why we surrendered. Not because we lost. We could have kept fighting. We could have made the war last another century. But every day we fought, we risked pushing them past their limits. Every attack we made might be the one that convinced them to stop being merciful. The High Council looked at those projections and made a choice. Surrender immediately. Completely. Show them we were no longer a threat. Pray they would show mercy one more time. Vorik looked at Mira with haunted eyes. They showed mercy. Captain Beck Hana led the peace negotiations. She demanded no revenge, no punishment, just peace. Just an end to the killing. She had the power to destroy us, and she chose to talk instead. What happened to the others? Mira asked. Park Tae-ho? Kim Yuna? Vorik pointed to the photograph on his wall, the one Mira had noticed earlier, but not examined closely. Now she looked at it carefully. It showed a younger Vorik, standing next to an elderly human male with one arm. Both were smiling. Park Tae-ho lived to be 93 years old. After the war, he became a teacher. He taught young humans about history, about war, about peace. 5 years before he died, I visited him on Earth. Vorik smiled, a genuine smile for the first time in the interview. He apologized to me. Can you imagine? This man who had given me nightmares for decades said he was sorry for the pain he had caused. He said, war had made them all do terrible things. I told him he had nothing to apologize for. He was protecting his people. He was fighting for his home. I would have done the same. We talked for hours that day, about the war, about the peace, about the future. When I left, he hugged me. This man who had tried to kill me, who I had tried to kill, hugged me like an old friend. And Kim Yuna? She opened a hospital on the border between human and Kelvani space, a place where both species could be treated together. She worked there until she was too old to stand. She saved thousands of lives, human and Kelvani alike. Vorik's voice softened. She died peacefully, surrounded by patients from both species who loved her. Mira sat back in her chair, overwhelmed. The recording device continued its quiet humming. So now you know, Vorik said. The truth about the human war front. The truth about why we surrendered. The truth about what humans really are, Mira asked quietly. What are they? Vorik thought for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was filled with something that sounded almost like wonder. They are nightmares that learned to dream. They are demons that chose to be kind. They are the most terrifying species in the universe, not because of their power, but because they have the wisdom to control it. He picked up the old dog tag one last time, running his fingers over the worn letters of Park Tae-ho's name. They could have destroyed us. They could have taken revenge for every world we conquered, every life we took. They had the power and the right. Instead, they chose peace. They chose mercy. They chose to build a future where their former enemies could become their friends. Vorik set down the dog tag and looked at Mira with ancient, tired eyes. Do I fear them? Yes. Every day. Even now, 40 years later, I wake up sometimes from dreams of burning forests and hollow eyes. The fear never fully goes away. But do I hate them? He shook his head slowly. How can I hate the people who saved my life? How can I hate the species that looked at us, the conquerors, the invaders, the enemy, and decided we were worth forgiving? Vorik stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the stars were shining peacefully in the night sky. Somewhere among those stars was Earth, the small blue planet that had changed everything. The humans have a saying, an old saying from one of their ancient books. Vorik's voice was soft. They say the measure of a person is not what they do when they are weak. It is what they do when they are strong. He turned to face Mira one final time. Humans are the strongest species in the galaxy, and they chose kindness. They chose mercy. They chose peace. That is what makes them the most dangerous and the most beautiful creatures in the universe. And that is why, after everything they put me through, after all the nightmares and the fear and the pain, Vorik smiled, old and tired and at peace. I am honored to call them friends. The old Kelvani sat in his chair by the window. His gray skin had become pale with age. His 4 eyes, once sharp and golden, were now cloudy and tired. 40 years had passed since the war, but his hands still shook when he thought about it. Mira, the young journalist, placed her recording device on the table. She was nervous. Everyone in the galaxy knew the name Vorik. He was one of the few soldiers who survived the human war front and agreed to speak about it. "Thank you for meeting me," Mira said softly. Vorik did not look at her. He stared out the window at the peaceful sky of Kelvin Prime. "You want to know about the humans," he said. It was not a question. "Yes, the new generation needs to understand. We only have stories and rumors. Nobody tells us the truth." Vorik laughed, but it was a sad and hollow sound. The truth is that we were fools. We thought we were gods. We had conquered 200 worlds. 200 planets fell to the Kelvani Dominion without much resistance. We were the greatest military power in the known galaxy. He finally turned to look at Mira. "Then we found Earth." Mira leaned forward. "What happened?" "Our scouts reported a small blue planet with primitive technology. The beings there were soft. They had weak bodies, short lives, and they spent most of their time fighting each other. Our generals laughed when they saw the reports. They said Earth would fall in 3 rotations. Vorik closed his eyes. It did not fall in 3 years. The old soldier stood up slowly and walked to a shelf. He picked up a small metal object. It was a human dog tag, worn and scratched. The name on it read, Park Tae-ho. "I was a young lieutenant when they sent me to Velos 9, Vorik continued. It was a human colony on the edge of their territory, a small planet with forests and mountains. Land, eliminate resistance, claim the world for the Dominion. We had 500 soldiers. The humans had maybe a few thousand civilians and a small defense force. That should have been easy," Mira said. "That is what we believed." Vorik sat back down, holding the dog tag tightly. "We landed at sunset. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. Our commanders told us the humans had probably run away. They said these creatures were cowards who could not face a real army." Vorik's hands began to shake harder. "That night, we set up 12 outposts around our landing zone. Standard formation. Safe. Secure. I was stationed at the main camp with the command unit. At midnight, the screaming started." Mira felt a chill run down her back. "Screaming?" "Outpost 7 went silent first. Just gone. No distress call. No weapon fire. Nothing. Then Outpost 3. Then 9. One by one, our positions went dark. We sent teams to investigate. They did not come back." The old Kelvani's voice dropped to a whisper. "By morning, we had lost 60 soldiers. 60 of our best warriors. We found some of the bodies. They were arranged, placed in patterns, symbols we did not understand. It was a message." "What kind of message?" "Fear." Vorik looked directly into Mira's eyes. "The humans wanted us to be afraid, and it worked. I had fought on 12 worlds before Velos 9. I had never known fear. That morning, standing over the bodies of my brothers, I felt it for the first time." He stood up again and walked to the window. "We thought we were hunting them. We had better weapons, better armor, better ships. But in those forests, in those mountains, none of that mattered. The humans knew the land. They moved like shadows. They attacked and disappeared before we could respond." "How many humans were there?" Mira asked. Vorik turned around. 23. 23? Against 500? 23 soldiers led by a man named Park Tae-ho, a sergeant, not even a high-ranking officer, just a sergeant with 22 soldiers under his command. They killed 140 of us in the first week. The old soldier walked back to his chair. "We called them the hollow-eyed ones, because when you looked into their eyes, there was no fear, no hesitation, no mercy, just cold, empty calculation. They looked at us like we were already dead, like killing us was just a task to complete." Vorik held up the dog tag again. "I met Park Tae-ho on the 8th night. We had tracked his unit to a valley. We thought we had them trapped. We moved in with 200 soldiers, surrounding them from all sides." He paused, his old eyes distant with memory. "It was a trap. Of course it was a trap. They had buried explosives along our approach routes. Half my unit died in the first 30 seconds. Fire everywhere. Chaos. I was thrown to the ground by the blast. When I looked up, he was there. Park Tae-ho, standing on a ridge above me, fire burning behind him. He was covered in dirt and blood. One of his arms hung loose at his side, clearly broken. But he stood there, looking down at me. Vorik's voice cracked, and he smiled. Not a happy smile, a predator smile. The smile of a hunter who has caught his prey. In that moment, everything I believed about the universe changed. The old Kelvani set down the dog tag and looked at Mira with haunted eyes. We were not the conquerors. We were not the hunters. We were not the superior species we believed ourselves to be. On that burning night, looking up at that broken, bleeding human who should have been dead 10 times over, I understood the truth. He leaned forward, his voice barely a whisper. We were the prey, and the hunt had only just begun.